Welcome back. I can see that everybody seems refreshed, a little bit tired, but it's the last session of the forum, and it has been a very interesting day, but I have to promise you that the last session is gonna be also very interesting. It's dedicated on public-private partnership, and the importance of public-private partnership has been highlighted in the previous sessions of the forum. During this last session, we will showcase example and good practices of cooperation between government institutions, civil societies, organizations, media, as well as international and regional organizations. It is important to build alliances against corruption, not only within our countries, but also across the countries and in the region. And I'm very happy that we have these lovely panelists with us today who will share practical examples from their work. Unfortunately, one of our panelists, Mr. Alexander Lemenov from State Watch Ukraine, was not able to join us since he couldn't travel due to the war in Ukraine. However, I hope that he is online, and I really hope that we will be able to meet him in some of our next events. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to our first panelist, and this is Mr. Ferenc Biro, President of the Hungarian Integrity Authority. He has a very extensive experience in preventive, detective, and compliance missions in different sectors. His work has significantly contributed to the field of compliance management systems and the fight against fraud and corruption. Ferenc, as a president of the Hungarian Integrity Authority, would you please share your views and experience in building public-private partnerships in Hungary?
So, absolutely, thank you very much. First of all, I really just wish to congratulate the organizers. I think today has been superbly organized conference with thought-provoking interventions, and I'm really grateful for the invitation and to be able to be here. My background is business. Yeah, so I've been a consultant in various Big Four companies for the past 25 years or so, and then when there was a position opening or tendering basically for the presidency of the Hungarian Integrity Authority, I applied, and now I'm here. So many of the experiences that I'm going to share today is coming from also from the private sector, right? So kind of like, if you like, I'm the embodied public-private cooperation. But probably just a few words on the authority itself. So the authority is designed to safeguard financial interests of the Union, but also that of Hungary, right? It is important to point out that this is an autonomous state administration organ, meaning that the President, I myself, report to the European Commission and to the Hungarian Parliament. Now this is while a dual reporting, the content of it is identical, right, before anybody comes to any different ideas. We aim to be professional and objective, and I have recruited, if you like, an elite team of professionals, both from the state administration and from business. So we are built up from Big Four auditors, from forensic auditors. I myself have a forensics past, from major law firms, Magic Circle law firms, as well as outstanding individuals from the tax office, from the national police, etc. The authority is set out to monitor the integrity of the public administration as such. We also conduct risk assessments and conduct investigations into alleged wrongdoings. We operate a whistleblower hotline. We receive a fairly steady inflow of whistleblower reports, which we always investigate if it is in the scope of the authority, obviously. And we are also designed, or our mandate is designed, to review asset declarations of the Hungarian public sphere. Now, this is the mandate that the law prescribes, or that the law gives us. But I believe that a fundamental improvement can only happen through a change in economical culture and in economic culture. And this is why we decided that one of the outspoken priorities for the next 5 years of the authority will be furthering a culture change in Hungarian economy, and how to achieve that certain behaviors and certain patterns will not be admissible and will not be tolerated. I am myself, as said, coming from business, and I'm a great fan or a great advocate of values-based leadership. And this also determined how I went into this role of building the authority. And it was quite easy to codify those values around which I believe the authority needs to do its work, right? So it's honor, integrity, determination. I mean, the issue itself requires a certain level of determination, obviously. You need to have a sense of duty. Obviously, you need to be an expert in what you do. And if you do that, if you're able to do that properly in a team, that always helps. Before giving you actually my own thoughts on PPPs, so public-private partnerships, I just wanted to very quickly highlight let's say, the original definition and what we believe to be covered by the traditional initiatives, right? For a number of decades now, there's an impetus on the public and the private sector working together, right? And these can take many forms and many instances, but generally it's around some sort of a collective action initiative that will encompass a private company or a body of private companies working together with various state organs or with civil sectors, etc., somehow to curb corruption, right? And I will not bore you with the full definition, but this is, generally speaking, this approach has two issues, right? So it has a prisoner's dilemma issue and a collective action type of issue. So the prisoner's dilemma is, I'm in a competitive disadvantage if I do not pay and everybody else pays, right? So this is what we usually hear, and when I was advising companies and boards, and this was ultimately always the last point that was brought up, that, okay, I'll do it, I can do it, I will do it, but what happens to the business, right? Strangely enough, we have had a couple of companies where we were able to measure the effect of compliance and the effect of compliant behavior, and on the long term in business, in that sense, meaning, let's say, 3 to 5 years. So on the long term, it turned out that they did not suffer from being compliant, right? So just because you are acting in a compliant manner, your revenues will not decrease. And where everybody thought that they would be in a competitive disadvantage, it turned out that they were the ones who were actually facilitating the bribes, right? Collective action, obviously, there's a prevailing sentiment that if somebody doesn't buy and the competitors will, and that will result in a distrust. Yeah? Our experience is that in the CE, so Central Eastern European markets, or for that matter in the SCE, enforcement is generally weak or practically non-existent, right? And even though there are, let's say, good initiatives, and there are spikes in enforcement, but an overall strong enforcement environment is just generally lags behind. The rules are, in our part of the world, unclear. Yeah, so they are frequently misspelled, they are frequently misinterpreted, and there's room always for interpretation, and that opens up the floor to misconduct. Nowadays, more than ever, we live in polarized societies, right? So the left and right are coming farther and farther apart, and that makes it very difficult for the societies to cooperate, which also mean that there's a crisis in values. So the original values that were codified and that were understood to be joint values of a specific society or of a certain society are deteriorating. And that ultimately means that PPPs, so public-private partnerships, will not be able to provide a feasible or, in my opinion, an adequate response to the problem. Even more so because such constructions were built on a joint understanding of common goals, right? This means that, and they are also designed basically to work in societies and to work in jurisdictions where the misuse of public funds is an exception and not the norm, right? And many of our markets are actually the ones where the misuse of public funds is actually the norm. Right? Compliance initiatives and systems are built on, and this is why obviously I myself am building them as well on values, right? So they are built on the assumption that our values are common and are universally understood. And now this is one of the ultimate fabrics that the society is built upon, and this is the fabric that comes apart today. As I pointed out on the previous slide, there's a crisis of values. And traditional values are difficult to uphold and are easily abandoned. And now this lack of values, because you do not have, or people do not have, let's say, an origo to go back to, or an initial starting point to go back to, such as an ethical codex that they can consult in ethical dilemmas, right? So the lack of values will inevitably result in a non-compliant behavior. So we believe that change must happen on a much deeper level within the society, and we will need to recodify values to achieve that. Training, public awareness, conferences, etc., I think these are super helpful, and they will further the cause ultimately, but without proper structural reforms, they will not be sufficient. So this is why the authority itself is identifying and showing positive examples. So this is what we are ultimately set out to do. We are also advocating for, and we ourselves are engaging in effective enforcement. We obviously spearhead a culture change through various initiatives. Let these be similar conferences, or let these be various studies, etc., etc. And we obviously work closely with academic and the private sector, and clearly with the civil society. And we do this because we do believe in the fact that a peaceful and inspiring future can only be built on honor and mutual trust. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave in five or so minutes, but I would be super happy to answer if you should have any questions.
Thank you, Ferenc. It was really very interesting and insightful, and I'm quite impressed by the last slide. I mean, it was a very nice conclusion and end of your presentation. I really would like to encourage the participants from the audience, as well as the ones who are watching us on Zoom. If you have any questions to Mr. Vino, to ask them now, because he's gonna leave in a couple of minutes. Christina? No. So if there are no questions, then we will move now to our next speaker, Boyko Todorov. Boyko Todorov is a senior associate fellow from the Center for the Study of Democracy, Bulgaria. He is a representative of the civil society in our panel. He has an impressive experience with over 25 years, experience with reforms in the field of rule of law and governance, international organizations, and education. His work has significantly contributed to the field of anti-corruption and the development of policy analysis and reform projects. He has also been teaching international development and non-profit management at the Political Science and European Studies Department of the American University in Bulgaria. Here today, we would like to ask him to explain why anti-corruption requires an alliance of public bodies and private institutions. What do you think, Boyko? The floor is yours.
I will gladly do that. But before you go, I just wanted to thank you and let you know how lucky you are, because I was quite pleased to hear you speak of cultural change. 25 years ago, that would have raised a lot of eyebrows. Cultural? No, we didn't talk about culture with respect to corruption then. So that's quite a development these days to have someone, bring that up as a major issue. So yeah, thank you. I bet you I can justify the need for public-private partnership in anti-corruption in one sentence and save us a lot of time. Well, anti-corruption should be public-private because corruption is public-private. Now, I'm not just being facetious here. This is not just playing on words. A quick clarification. I will be speaking here about corruption as it appears in our neck of the woods here, in our societies, where it's endemic, where you can say it's ambient, where in a lot of public institutions it might have become the default mode of operation. In this kind of environment, we cannot have public corruption being so widespread unless we have private corruption. Now, these days we may have acknowledged this. Today this may be more or less common knowledge. But 25 years ago, as you said, almost to the day, late 98, when we started our anti-corruption programs, we very much insisted on they being a partnership, a joint effort between private institutions, civil society, business, and government. And that, at the time, was not understood, to put it mildly. That was frankly frowned upon. And it wasn't just because at the time there was a lot of mistrust between government and civil society. It was because at the time, that's late 90s, we everywhere, and not just in this country, the dominant idea, the dominant concept of corruption was very different. It was primarily thought of as a moral failure. It was thought of as an island of corrupt and greedy public officials preying upon a sea of honest, hard-working citizens. Remember the two anti-corruption conventions of the late 1990s, the Council of Europe conventions, the Civil Law Convention and the Criminal Law Convention. The Civil Law Convention was not an anti-corruption convention. It was a remedy convention. If someone has suffered through corruption, some damages, they can seek redress. That was the idea. The true anti-corruption convention was the criminal one. So initially, corruption was conceptualized, if you will give the term, as a crime, right? As almost as any other crime. And hence, it was thought of, anti-corruption was thought of as a hard enforcement. So when we were suggesting a partnership between civil society and private sector and government, it was, no. You do your awareness, whatever you do, and we in government, this is big boys business, right? We'll do the real anti-corruption work. Alex Girganov started the animal analogies earlier today. Let me continue these. If your house has a rodent problem, you can address it by setting traps. I mean, they may not get rid of all of them, but still will be quite effective. But if your house is infested by cockroaches, forgive me for the crude analogy, then it doesn't make much sense, to take off your slipper and start chasing them around the kitchen counter. What you do is you manage the environment. You starve them of food, of water. You maintain hygiene. And so from the initial assumption of corruption as an island of greedy officials, we started to realize that, in fact, what needs to be done is management of the environment. And previous speakers spoke very well about deep cultural change in society. But again, why should this be done in partnership, not in parallel with government, but in partnership with government? Let me use another analogy from the economy. So in the economy, suppose you have an objective. That would be to say bring prices down, right? What do? You suppress demand and you encourage supply. And prices go down. But that has to be done in coordination, at the same time, jointly, not in parallel. Not one hand does that and the other hand does the other, but it has to be done jointly. And the same thing is, applying this analogy to corruption, whether we think of supply and demand of bribery, or we think of supply and demand of integrity, it works both ways. It has to be done simultaneously. For the very simple reason that corruption is not like any other crime. Corruption is transactional. It does involve certain amount of exchange between the private sphere and the public sphere. Now, how do we go about this? How does anti-corruption policy manage to address both the supply and the demand? Depress the supply of bribery, increase and depress the demand from public officials, or conversely, increase the demand for integrity from the public and increase the supply of integrity from public officials. That was what Alex Girganov spoke earlier, knowledge. Now, in any public policy, what the government implementing that policy needs is information, right? It needs to know what the problem is, and it needs to know what the effect of those policies are. But with corruption, that is, as you would imagine, problematic. Remember, there's a very popular notion that the poor in the society, the poor segments in the society, they are the worst affected by corruption, right? The World Bank thinks that, others as well. Now, I don't know. If I look at the record of how the poor, those who are considered the poor, are voting these days, that doesn't bear out. it's much more useful to think of corruption as a victimless crime. But not victimless in the sense that it doesn't affect anyone, but that its impact, its effects are both obscure, they're not visible immediately as it is with other crime, and they're also diffused. They're not, the victims are not immediately identified. So if in other government policies we need reliable knowledge, this is all the more important in anti-corruption policy, because impact is obscure, behavior is hidden, those transactions, that transactional nature of corruption is hidden, and also its effects are not immediately obvious. So what Alex earlier presented is knowledge of two factors, two aspects. One is how much there is and what kind of it is, you know, through victimization studies, you know, the self-reporting of corruption, both by businesses and by individuals. And the other is even more important. It's about achieving cultural change. It requires knowledge of attitudes. Now, if government policy is to align the incentives and disincentives to bring corruption down, it needs to understand those underlying attitudes, both in the private sector, as the previous speaker, and also among the general public. Now, when we say partnership, just one final thing. When we say partnership, partnership with whom? You know, if business and civil society is to cooperate with government, who exactly in government? The whole government, this incumbent executive, parliament, public institutions? That, in fact, is tactical. The decision on this is tactical for the simple reason is that the political importance of public-private partnerships is that it allows anti-corruption policy to span the election cycle. This is very briefly.
Very much. Thank you very much for this very thorough analysis and explanation. I think there is a question from one of our panelists, Daniel.
Hello. So very nice words, boycott, but very tough words indeed. So you said at one moment that corruption became like a mode of functioning, like a default mode of functioning. If you'd have the whole power in this world to change one thing about that in order to just the things to become better, what will be that thing? Just one little thing in the whole mechanism. It's just like an open question, but I'm just trying to find out.
Oh, that's the easy question, right? The one thing. If I would have won the Nobel Prize if I knew that. We have a war now in Ukraine, and if you look at what the Ukrainians are doing at the front, is they're building a tactical advantage and trying to transform this into strategic advantage. In public life, in government institutions, what that would mean is you start building islands of professional integrity within the public service. Now, start with key institutions depending on the political setup of a country. The National Audit Office. Maybe a political party. There is not just one thing. My point is that what the strategy is to build certain nodes of resilience, certain nodes of integrity, and then connect them.
So the system can become better.
That's the whole point of partnership. So they can support each other. They can find what's the word? No, not alliances. It will come to me. Sorry. legitimacy. They can find legitimacy in each other's efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no immediate questions, I would suggest we move to our next speaker, and then you think about it, and probably you can have your questions when we finish all the presentations. Our next panelist is Alexandra Vujinovic from Montenegro. She is the Secretary of the Council of the Agency for Prevention of Corruption of Montenegro. Before she joined the agency, she worked in the Ministry of Justice, and she contributed to the field of anti-corruption by promoting effective strategies to combat corruption and by establishing regional and international cooperation. Today, Alexandra will present the experience and good practices of the anti-corruption agency in Montenegro. Alexandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Desislava. First of all, I would like to greet you all, and of course thanks to the organizers for sending an invitation to this event. My presentation today will be mostly focused on corruption risk assessment in some of the key areas of the agency's work, such as corruption proofing of legislation and integrity plans, and I will also speak about whistleblower protection and reports, and asset declarations by public officials. But before I start, let me just quickly say that the agency is an independent body established in 2016 on the basis of the law on prevention of corruption. It has a very wide range of competencies since it is also responsible for implementation, supervising the implementation over 2 other laws, such as law on financing of political entities and election campaigns, and also the law on lobbying. Our competencies include prevention of conflict of interest, supervision of restrictions of exercise in public functions, control of receiving gifts, sponsorship, donations. Also, we issue opinions on the existence of threats to the public interest, indicating the existence of corruption. And on the other hand, we supervise implementation over the lobbying activities and issuing misdemeanor warrants and misdemeanor proceedings if we find any violations of the law, of these 3 laws. In accordance with the law on prevention of corruption, as I said, the agency issues opinions on legislation in terms of identifying risks that can lead to corruption. Those risks mainly relate to imprecision of norms, wide discretionary powers, lack of transparency, but can also imply violation of ethics, damage to the public interest. So basically everything that could potentially open up space for any kind of corrupt behavior. It is important to say that we do not analyze legal text in terms of their compatibility with the national legal system. It is the job of the Constitutional Court, but we issue recommendations for eliminating risks that we identify in those legislation. Those recommendations are mostly aimed at reducing risks or at their total elimination. Since 2016, we issued opinions on 65 regulations, and when speaking about the effectiveness of our opinions, although they are not legally binding, I can say that several very important legal texts were either suspended or amended on the basis of our recommendations. For your illustration, I'll just mention that back in 2019, there was a massive public dispute in Montenegro after it was revealed that the government allocated apartments and loans under favorable conditions to public officials from all 3 branches of power. It was all done on the basis of the decision on the method and criteria for solving the housing needs of public officials. And we analyzed this act, and identified that it contained problematic norms which related to the extremely wide discretionary powers to the government, which enabled them to allocate apartments or money to all public officials in Montenegro. We also saw this decision problematic from the standpoint that it was a very powerful tool for undue political influence and for endangering the concept of checks and balances in Montenegro. And as a consequence, we suggested the government to put this act out of force, which was done 2 years later after our persistent pressure. It was publicly very well accepted, and we also have other successful examples, but due to our time limit, I can share it with you later. We also assess risks through integrity plans. For the time being, we have 740 public authorities who have the obligation to adopt and implement integrity plans. And those integrity plans are entered into a special IT application that we developed. And this application allows us to process and analyze big data, and most importantly, to measure the intensity of identified risks, and therefore to then find measures for mitigating those risks. The assessment of integrity plans is based on the methodology for assessing the implementation of anti-corruption measures, which was developed in cooperation with the UNDP office in Montenegro. And this methodology contains criteria and indicators that public authorities have to meet in order to mitigate measures that they foresee in those integrity plans. With the kind assistance of Regional Anti-Corruption Initiative, we developed a corruption risk assessment guidance, which contains checklists for 2 sectors, higher education and state-owned enterprises, since they were recognized as highly vulnerable to corruption. And these checklists for both sectors offer a set of questions which will help those institutions to select and implement appropriate risk mitigation measures. Public officials in Montenegro have the obligation to submit asset declaration, after which the agency is checking those data on the basis of through IT platform that we developed, and which enables us direct and real-time access to the databases of the 7 institutions in Montenegro: Ministry of Interior, Tax Administration, Real Estate Administration, Central Registry of Business Entities, Central Bank of Montenegro, and Securities Commission, and those data are cross-checked. If we find some incompatibilities between the reported data and the data that are contained in the databases, we issue misdemeanor warrants and initiate misdemeanor proceedings. I can also say that asset declaration is carried out through annual verification plan, which contains obligatory or mandatory category of public officials whose reports are checked each year. And this category involves high-level public officials, starting from the President of Montenegro, a President of the Parliament, a President of the government, and ministries, while other reports are selected through so-called random selection functionality, which is done by the software, and which ensures that there is no human impact in selection of reports that are to be verified. When speaking about our proactive approach, at the end of 2020, we introduced the practice of the so-called monitoring the lifestyle of public officials, with the aim of monitoring the decrease of assets of public officials during the term of office. If we find big discrepancies between the real lifestyle of public officials and the data that he or she reported to us, that cannot be, of course, explained, we refer this case to the Special Prosecutor's Office for further action. So far, we had a couple of those cases which involved high-level officials in Montenegro. One of them was the case of the former Minister of Health, where we found out that the data and his income that he reported to us could not cover, and they're not compatible with his real lifestyle that was reported in media. For these purposes, we use publicly available data, such as media, newspaper articles, social networks, databases of our institutions, so on. And after that, we decide on processing the case. It is also important to say that Montenegro signed international treaty on exchange data for verification of asset declaration, and this document is still to be ratified by our parliament. The agency acts upon whistleblowers' reports on endangering public interest and also ex officio. And if the allegations from the reports are justified, we give opinion with recommendations to mitigate or eliminate totally the damage that was caused. If we suspect that a criminal offense, which is to be prosecuted ex officio, has been committed, we submit the whole case to the competent state prosecutor's office, which has the duty to inform us back about the outcome of the proceedings. We also provide protection to the whistleblowers if we find out that they suffered damage, and also provide professional assistance to them, which also include representation before the courts. Since 2016, we had 36 of such requests, out of which 12 were approved, 6 cases are still ongoing, and 2 requests were referred to the police since the whistleblowers requested physical protection, which we do not provide. When speaking about the statistics, most of the reports that were submitted to us referred to labor relations with 34%. After that, we have reports that relate to acting to the state body with 26%, and it is followed by the act of the local bodies with 10 or almost 11%. On annual level, since 2016, you can see that we have on average from 10 to 12 cases that are referred to the prosecutor's offices, and I can say that we, for the time being, have 2 convictions for abuse of office. One relates to the public sector, the other one relates to the private sector, and 50% of these, around 50% of these reports are still in the process of, are still before the prosecutor's offices, and we are waiting for the response about the outcome of these proceedings. So that would be brief overview about our activities in this regard, and I will be happy to answer your questions in more detail if you find it interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. The Anti-Corruption Agency of Montenegro is very active, and I'm very happy when we were able also to present the successful cases and work of the anti-corruption agencies, because I also think that it's very important not to show that when there is a progress. I know that there is always, we can always ask and look for better results, but it's also important to show the progress that we have achieved through the years. Our last panelist is Daniel Bellinger, Head of Service for Implementing Structural Funds Studies and Strategies at the National Integrity Agency of Romania. Daniel has graduated with a doctorate from the University of Bucharest, and his diploma thesis was focused on the coherence of macroeconomic policies under crisis conditions. Very impressive. After working in a research field for many years, he joined the National Integrity Agency, and since 2018 he is head of department, where he manages European funds, financed projects, and conducts research on various topics related to the agency profile. Daniel will present today an example of the ANI. ANI is the Romanian National Integrity Agency, partnership with the civil society, and more specifically, the sociological research on the integrity law reforms in Romania. Daniel,
Thank
the
you very
floor is
much, Desi. Yeah, it seems like I'm the last man standing here today, so it's the first time for me when I'm attending a conference until the end. Today I'm going to speak about outcomes of the partnership with the civil society. I want to start with, to quote Alfonso X of Castile. He lived in the 13th century. He was surrounded himself. He had a lot of partnership with poets, with philosophers, scientists, even magicians. So he used to say, one of his teachings was that old wood is to burn, old wine to drink, but all friends to trust. So I think this must be the key link between the public and private partnerships. So right now in Romania, we are trying to bring coherence among the set of the rules of integrity. For this, we are pursuing a new funded project, ANI, together with the Ministry of Justice and Transparency International Romania. This project has the following specific objectives: updating the legal framework for preventing and sanctioning conflicts of interest, incompatibilities, and unjustified wealth. Complementary, we are trying to support the authorities and public institutions in order to optimize the process for transitioning to the electronic submission of assets and interest disclosure, but also to increase the level of knowledge of persons who are responsible with implementing legal provisions. This project will be finalized in December this year, and its main output will be a legislative proposal that should enter into force by the end of 2024, according to the Romanian Recovery and Resilience Plan. By now, we had, within this project, we had several outcomes from the collaboration with the civil society. I want to remind here that we had 16 training sessions delivered to public servants on how to properly fill in the assets and interest disclosures, where experts on behalf of ANI and of Transparency participated, delivered those trainings. They were delivered around the main cities in Romania. We had almost 350 participants. The civil society also ensured the proper ground for consultations with academia and authorities on how to improve the legislative framework. We had 2 communication campaigns built from scratch and launched online on conflict of interest, whistleblowers protection, assets and interest disclosure, so on and so forth. Also, regarding the legislative proposal, we had an ex-ante evaluation of the integrity framework. By the end of December, we'll have ready the draft of the legislative proposal, and our latest achievement was a research conducted on how the integrity framework is perceived by the citizens. I want to go a little bit deeper into this. We had 3,000 people involved. We had the following research hypotheses. Actually, it was a survey. So we try to find out if the Romanian society is aware of the authorities that must ensure an integrity climate, or are the people who are more ethical prone to asking for more rigid and tougher laws. What is the perception in regard to the main actors that are promoting integrity in Romania? How are the EU institutions perceived in their anti-corruption effort? And last but not least, if ANI is known as, let's say so in a commercial manner, as a brand. So one of the first questions was, how do you react when you witness a violation of the law? So 44% of the respondents answered the fact that they report the violation of the law to the authorities. 29% they will express their indignation, while 17% would go public for that. We followed by asking them on how do you rate the legislative framework in the field of integrity. The vast majority of the people who answered to this survey consider the law on integrity too soft, almost 70%. This is huge. 21% of them answered that the law on integrity is okay, it's average, and 5% that is too tough. We wanted to find out if there is any degree of cognitive dissonance, and we somehow compared the person that would report violation of the law, if they are the same people who would consider that the law should be tougher. So 72% of the people who would report a violation of the law also consider the law that should be tougher. Further, we asked them if they know which are the institutions that have to ensure the public integrity of public servants and dignitaries in Romania. Unfortunately, 65% of them answered that they do not know, while only 35% of them answered with yes. We continued, we took the 35%, and we asked to name some of these authorities. On the first place, it was a surprise also for us that it came ANI, followed by DNA, but also the police. But the biggest surprise for us, it was the mayor's office who came on the second place. Regarding to the EU anti-corruption institution perceptions, we have asked who do you think that is promoting integrity in Romania? The vast majority also consider the fact that EU anti-corruption institutions are responsible for promoting integrity in Romania, followed by the European Commission, and only on the third place the Romanian anti-corruption institutions. We asked also the people if they heard about the National Integrity Agency. Half of them knew about the National Integrity Agency, but half of them didn't. So we took the half that knew about ANI, and we asked them if they know what is the role of the agency. And only half of the half were aware of the role of the agency. In regard to respecting the framework on integrity in different areas, the people, the society considers the fact that the least integrity problems are in the field of the national defense and army, followed by education, police, while on the last places we have central and local administration. Just to sum up, to put it in a nutshell, current integrity framework and sanctions are considered to solve by the citizens. We have the EU institutions, which are considered the main actors for promoting integrity in Romania. Army is the sector which is considered to be with the fewest integrity problems. Not so many people know which are the institutions in charge of ensuring integrity in Romania, but from the ones who know, ANI is known, and I must say that this is one of the direct results of the projects implemented together with the civil society organization. So I want to remind at the end some other good practices, cooperation with the civil society within international projects, and I want to thank here the colleagues of CSD, RAI, R2G4P initiatives, because we have also read some of the reports in order to be connected with the latest developments in the field and just to have an opinion on the state of the play. So thank you very much, and I'm glad to answer to some of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. And now it's time for questions. So if there are any questions from the audience or questions received on Zoom, no questions from our participants who follow us online. If there are no questions from the audience,
Just a quick thought that I had while listening to our colleagues. Do you notice how sophisticated, given the experience of Montenegro and Romania, how sophisticated these anti-corruption institutions have become? I mean, the range of expertise, the range of issues that you're addressing. I used to think that corruption is not a very useful concept because it's an umbrella concept. Now, at one end you have small bribe to the fire inspector to look the other way. And on the other end, you have the Minister of, I don't know, Public Works stepping down and joining immediately the management board of a water management company. Now, these have almost nothing to do with each other. But the usefulness, the benefit of this concept of corruption is this kind of professionalism that it brings, sophistication, I would say, that it brings to these anti-corruption institutions. Wouldn't you say? Yeah.
I cannot agree more. I'm also following this field for more than 15 years now, and I can also notice that there is a progress. And as I've already said, like, we are very much focused on the deficiency, and that's how it, and the improvement, and that's how it should be, because there is a room of improvement. But on the other hand, yes, there is a progress achieved, and I think it should be also presented. I'm following the work of the anti-corruption agencies as head of the Regional Anti-Corruption Initiative Secretariat, and I have to say that, I mean, in those years, a lot have been achieved, not only on cases, but as you said, on developing new instruments and methodologies and new approaches, and that there is a lot of interest and ambition in the professional as working in these agencies. However, going back into how we can make it better, I was just wondering, and this is a question for my colleagues from the anti-corruption agencies, you have already pointed out some good practices and examples of cooperation with civil society and private sector. However, do you think we could do something more, and in which areas do you think the public-private partnership could contribute to your work?
Yes. Thank you, Desislava, for this question. It is very important since we have a very significant support that is coming from the NGO sector. This is especially important for us when it comes to assessing the effectiveness of integrity plans, and that is why we had the representative of one NGO who was involved in setting up the criteria and indicators for assessing the effectiveness of implementation of those measures. It is important that the NGO sector is also involved in developing of special reports, both sectoral and on the national level, according to which you can see where integrity plans are mostly effective and where they require further action and further mitigation measures. Of course, there are certain areas where our cooperation could be improved, of course, and all the constructive measures and all constructive opinions are very welcome for us to help us improve our work in all the competencies. So that would be my brief answer for this.
Thank you. Daniel?
So I think that we can benefit from the civil society organization. I think actually you can benefit from their experience on writing and developing projects, because somehow our resources are limited, and like, I know, following like certain complementary objectives that we have to reach, we can benefit from their expertise on developing projects and on their know-how and so on and so forth. So
Yes, this is a very good point, which actually complements to the discussion from the first panel, that resources are a very important part as well of the work. And I was wondering if Boyko could elaborate a little bit more and say, and probably think about, or have any suggestions on how we could better engage between public and authorities and civil society, but also business, media. How do you think we could, are there any new ways that we could work together, not only developing methodologies and exchange of knowledge, trainings, but probably, as you said, building alliances, think tanks, work together? I don't know. Do you have any ideas?
Well, the most effective the most effective.
Effective.
I'm saying effective. I'm not saying that it's very easy. The most effective way would be to involve the private sphere, civil society and business, in the design of policies and in the monitoring of policies. Again, this is where government alone cannot do it. A, because it lacks the knowledge, sufficient knowledge of the incentives, sufficient knowledge of the environment, and B, because to monitor the effect of its policies is costly. Cost is also the difficulty of thinking of corruption, of anti-corruption only as hard enforcement, only as criminal enforcement. Because if you have to have criminal enforcement again in an environment when felony is rife, when you have non-compliance, when you have infringement which is over 20-30%, that becomes just impractical. So in terms of monitoring of the effects of anti-corruption policy, that is where both business and civil society can provide the feedback back to government policies. These institutions might be effective. Sorry, no. I meant sophisticated, not necessarily effective.
Might not be effective.
Might not be effective. No, but again, corruption is a very broad range of issues. You know, if you bring them under one institutional umbrella, it becomes almost impossible to follow up on all of these, all of the developments that government policy wants.
Yes, I agree with you. Unfortunately, the anti-corruption agencies do not have unlimited resources. This is something that has been also mentioned in the morning. My last question would be, what technical support and expertise for all of you do you think you need from EU and international community? Here I'm referring to donors, EU bodies, regional international organizations, similar-minded civil society organizations, networks. What technical support?
Well, so far we had significant support from both EU institutions and regional anti-corruption initiatives. We mostly need this technical assistance in terms of further developing of IT systems and everything that could enable us more effective verification of asset declarations, and also in terms of developing other parts of IT system when it comes to integrity plans and whistleblower protection. So it is also important that we would need the support for developing different projects that are aimed at building our capacities, both on human level and on technical level, and for implementation of the main anti-corruption institutions arising from the law on prevention of corruption and other laws that we are responsible for implementation.
Thank you, Daniel.
So I think we need instruments that will allow us to pursue our objectives. But by now, I'm happy to say that we have received a lot of support through EU finance projects, and our latest achievement is the fact that we'll start in December a project with the colleagues from RAI, CSD, the Trento University. Also ANAC in Italy, I think, is one of the members of the consortium. So besides this, we are also benefiting from DG reform support through the TSI instrument. We just started a project, and this project has to provide us some methodologies in order to verify the assets in the disclosures for prevention of conflicts of interest, some of the guidelines on whistleblower protection, and so on and so forth. So we have, so the next year will be very, very crowded. So thank you very much.
Yes, and we are very much looking forward to our future cooperation. Borko, do you have anything to comment or add?
Again, listening to the responses to your last question from Montenegro and Romania, I think there's one key word I'd like us to leave with: professionalism.
Thank you. Very nice. Are there any questions from the audience? I know everybody's tired. Ruslan is not. Ruslan?
Sorry, I just came in, so you'll excuse me if I might be repeating something, but something's been bothering me. And it's a great panel, with professionalism, as Borko said. We've been thinking the high-level corruption, in a way, is what politicians are responsible for, right? I mean, there you have not just the law enforcement, the prevention tools, but you need to also have political tools, to get at that high-level corruption and state capture networks. The question is, looking at from your experience, do you feel the region as a whole has been moving into routinizing the anti-corruption work, meaning that we have, it's like a job that we'll be doing no matter what, no matter what the government there is, that we will be investigating, that we'll have certain KPIs at the end of the year, that somebody will be looking at what all the institutions we've created on anti-corruption have done. Do you have that feeling? And then also, Borko, I mean, both the anti-corruption agencies and also Desi, you could probably have a kind of a take here, but also, do you have a feeling that we're moving into that direction, that we have this normally functioning, not normally functioning, but functioning institutions that, doesn't need to have necessarily the political leadership? There was a question in the morning to Laura Kovic, I believe, from the Romanian Association of Municipalities. The thing is, you can't always, yes, we need success and we need leaders, but we can't always kind of wait for that leader to take that one successful decision. Do we have these institutions? Do you think that we could do something more to make these institutions, happen even without a leader? So in a way, that they somehow automatically function. Thank you, like an AI or something. Just to bring AI back into.
Yeah, AI is the word of the day. Yeah.
Thanks.
Daniel or somebody or?
I just think of it as the healthcare system. So what in a healthcare system in a society do you need? You need a wide range of services from emergency care to prevention. Right? In order to maintain public health and preserve public health, you need an architecture of public health which manages the different aspects of public health. School from the prevention, let's say at schools, to the emergency room and in the provision of emergency services. It's the same thing with anti-corruption. We've been focusing in the last years on anti-corruption agencies, right? Bring them under one roof. Perhaps, again with the analogy of healthcare, perhaps we need an anti-corruption architecture that addresses those range of, and again speaking of government, those range of risks and aspects of corruption that we have. Not just a single point of intervention from government, but an anti-corruption architecture that looks at the various aspects, the various faces of corruption in a society, and that would mainstream it. If you have a single point of government policy, that's a single point of vulnerability. If you want to capture it, then you know the phone number, as Kissinger said. But if you spread that anti-corruption architecture throughout government services, then it's much more difficult to influence it. So that would be the mainstreaming that I think you have in mind.
I don't know if I can add something else, because I agree with Boyko, and just one more little thing. I think that in this healthcare system we have to switch the focus to prevention. So this is one of the main things, because I'll be like, if we are doing anti-corruption all our lives, probably it wouldn't be better, you know. So we have to move the focus to prevention.
Well, I would just add that probably not to move the focus, but both prevention and repression should go hand in hand, and just like really focus on all sides. And I also agree completely 100% with Boyko. Yes, we need to build a strong and sustainable anti-corruption architecture. However, called me old-fashioned, but I still think that the human factor is very important, whether it's going to be a leader or whether it's going to be all the people, officers who work in the anti-corruption. I think all of them, everyone, every person working and having the commitment is important, and that's why, Ruslan, I think, no, the human factor is unavoidable, and yes, it might sound discouraging, but I think it would be, unfortunately, in the next, I don't know, probably even centuries, a topic that we have to deal every day if we want to be successful. I think it's a constant work. We should not just. I don't think we could say like now at this point we are successful, because there is a huge dynamic also from the side of the people without integrity.
Yes, I agree, and I would just like to add that I think that we have institutions and legislation in place, but we should take more proactive approach when it comes to strengthening regional and international cooperation, especially in terms of verifying the assets and declarations of high-level officials. And in that regard, it would be essential to show additional political will when it comes to signing this treaty on exchange of data for the verification of asset declaration.
So I would like to really thank all of you for your commitment. The fact that you have stayed also for the last session just shows how important it is. I would like also to thank the speakers, the panelists, the organizers, and I can now give the floor to Ruslan to...
Thank you. Thanks, Boyko. Well, thanks so much for staying until the very end. I think, at least from my experience, this is one of the best anti-corruption conferences and resilience conferences that I've seen recently. And we got a lot of raving reviews from our friends and colleagues, and standing ovation essentially for our speakers today. And I really think we had, from political leadership to the technical public-private partnership sessions that we just had, and that will continue doing that. I mean, essentially, we think that this has been the role of the Regional Anti-Corruption Initiative, of the CELDI network, and all our partners from the anti-corruption institutions in the region, to both provide new impulses for anti-corruption work, but also to continue expanding the capacity that we work with every day. Because in the end of the day, I mean, corruption as we saw it, and we thought that that is the end of history and that democracy somehow prevailed. But there will always be this pressure on our security. And if we want to live in a democratic, resilient societies, you know, we need to take care that we always constantly reinvent our anti-corruption programs, that we're always vigilant, and that we actually find a way, find the leadership, but also find the everyday grit, as I say, to kind of know that we're doing the right thing, and to know that we need to always do and go 1 mile, one step further. So I thank all of you for being here today. I thank my colleagues who did wonderful work here at CSD, and in particular Daniela, Gloria, Christina, Milena, Mariana, Marianne, and all the colleagues at CSD. You didn't see them, but they're here and they're doing a great job. And I'd like to also kind of finally thank our interpreters who stayed all throughout the day. We had also French interpretation in the morning, so I think that's great. And there is, I think, there is a lot of work to be done afterwards. Please enjoy Sofia, and I look forward to welcoming you again. And please join me for a round of applause to CSD staff and to our interpreters. Thank you.
And Jerusalem.
Namaste.